Is Jacob Meacham with the Alexander City Chamber of Commerce and the Lake Martin Young Professionals. Our Access to the Issues series is meant to bring the public and our YP group together in order to inform and engage on important issues that are facing our community. So a while back we got together to decide what the second in our series of Access to the Issues would be, and with it being an election year, we invited the candidates running for Alabama House of Representatives District 81 seat to join us for a town hall forum. So we're very happy and thankful for the gentlemen tonight joining us, Mr. Ed Oliver and Mr. Jeremy Jeffcoat. Let's give them a hand. I would like to thank the sponsors of our series, Access to the Issues, Engineered Cooling Services, and Tallapoosa County Commissioner T.C. Coley. Without them, events like this would not be possible for our group to do. We also have season-long supporters of the YP program. You can see those businesses and individuals here behind me. Valley National Bank is the presenting sponsor for Lake Martin YP. Very thankful for their support throughout the year, not only of the events and activities that we do, but also for allowing us to have this beautiful facility tonight for an event such as this. Our gold sponsors are Lee Marketing Group, Nowlin and Associates Wealth Management, represented tonight by Mr. Lee Williams, who is in the audience, and Russell Medical. Very thankful for their support as well. So the way that everything's going to go down tonight, the gentlemen are going to give close to 5-minute opening remarks just to introduce themselves, kind of outline their platform a little bit for you guys if you haven't already heard it. Following their introductions, we're going to dive into some questions that we did our best to research and make sure that we were informed about what the important issues are that could be facing either one of these gentlemen when they arrive in Montgomery in 2019. I want to thank outgoing State Representative Mark Tuggle for sharing time with us in order to help us be informed and educated on what those issues are, and I'm very thankful for his support as well. So these guys did ask me to just make a couple of job description type of announcements. The Alabama House of Representatives is the lower chamber in the Alabama State Legislature alongside the Alabama State Senate. The House forms the legislative branch and works alongside the governor of Alabama to create laws and establish a state budget. Legislative authority and responsibilities of the Alabama House include passing bills on public policy matters, setting levels for state spending, raising and lowering taxes, and voting to uphold or override gubernatorial vetoes. Now, the House is comprised of 105 seats. These gentlemen will be one of those. So it's important to know that they'll be part of a team in Montgomery, not even a full 1% of the team, but 0.095% of a team, if you want to look at it that way. So all of these seats in the Alabama House are up for election this year on November the 6th. It's currently comprised of 72 Republicans and 33 Democrats. We did a coin flip at the beginning to determine the order in which the guys would deliver their opening remarks and answer questions afterwards. Again, we did our best to put together a good list of topics and questions. There's no way we can ask all of the questions that are important to everyone. I know these gentlemen would love to talk with each and every one of you between now and November if you have any questions following the event that aren't asked tonight. We do ask that everyone remains respectful of the event and just, mind your manners. So without any further ado, Ed will, Mr. Jeffcoat is first to introduce themselves. You guys didn't come here to hear me, so take it away, Jeremy.
I came to hear you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Jacob. Thank you to the Chamber and the Young Professionals. Of course, the folks here at Valley National for the use of this beautiful room. It's a couple of times I've been here now. It's always impressive to come in. So, and thank you to all of you for being here, too, and showing an interest in an important election that's coming up in November. I'd also like to thank Ed for being here, too. I appreciate you as well. November is going to be a big election in the state of Alabama. There's a lot of offices open. We're running for one of those, the District 81 House of Representatives. My name is Jeremy Jeffcoat. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the general manager at Lake Broadcasting here in town. My wife Stacy and I live in Alex City. We have 3 children, Taylor, Tucker, and Tanner. Taylor is in the banking business in Mississippi. where he and his beautiful wife Bethany have blessed us with 2 granddaughters, and we have a grandson on the way in November, as luck would have it. Tucker is the middle child. He graduated from Benjamin Russell in 2017. He's a second-year college student now. And Tanner is the youngest and is a senior at Benjamin Russell, and Lord willing will graduate in the spring, if everything goes according to plan. I've never run for office before, so this is a new venture for me. But I'm running because I think it's important, and I'm running because I believe in working people. And I don't feel like working people have a voice a lot of times. I don't feel like working people are even thought about sometimes as decisions are made that affect all of us. And working people, I believe, need to be considered. I believe that because I'm a working person myself. Like most of you, I got up and went to a job this morning. And I do that every day to try to make an impact on my company and on my community, to try to give back and do some things and support a family. And I think people are looking for some representation in that. And we've got some things working against working people right now. 20% of our families in District 81 live below the poverty line. 25% of our children live below the poverty line. Income in Alex City proper has been flat for 20 years. We've got a low median income in the district as a whole. So we've got some challenges and some things that we need to work on. I think working people want a chance at better, higher paying jobs. I think they want a chance at an education system that gives their children a chance to succeed. I think they want a health care system that's affordable and accessible, where we don't have people being laid off like we had 2 weeks ago, where we don't have continued rising costs. And I think they want a state government in Montgomery that's not an embarrassment every time you turn on the television. And we've had 5 state legislators that have been either indicted or pled guilty in the last year alone. Governors resigning, Speaker of the House convicted on bribery charges. So all of that is bad. It's not good things. So we need to work towards improving things that we can improve. We're 43rd in median income in this state. We're 46th in education, 49th in healthcare. We're 50th in infant mortality, and we're 50th in life expectancy now, falling below Mississippi there. So these things need to be dealt with. Fact of the matter is, if you think everything's hunky-dory and we're moving along great, I'm not your candidate. I'm not going to be your guy. If you think that we need to continue with the status quo, maintain what we're doing, then I'm probably not going to be your candidate, because it seems to me like every 4 years we get same kind of candidates supported by the same special interest groups that give us the same policies, and we get the same results. If you believe, however, that working people need a chance to earn a better living with a better, higher paying job, then I need your help on November 6th. If you believe that our education system, our teachers, our students, our administrators are as smart and talented and capable and creative as anyone in the state or anyone in the country, then I need your help on November 6th, because we have an underfunded education system that doesn't give our teachers or our kids a chance to reach their God-given potential. If you believe, like I do, that we need a healthcare system that's affordable and accessible, that protects our local hospitals, because our nurses and doctors and administrators are as smart and capable and talented and creative as anywhere in the state or anywhere in the country, then I need your help on November 6th. And if you believe, like I do, that our state government needs tough ethics laws and term limits on the Alabama legislature finally, then I need your help on November 6th. I think it's a turning point election. I think we can do some big things over the next 4 years. I think we can take some big steps. But I can't do it without you. I can't even fight for it without you. So tonight, I hope we're going to talk about all these issues. We're going to connect. And then after this, if you want to stay around and talk, I'm glad to do that too. For those of you who I've just met tonight, thank you so much for being here. God bless y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. How about now? All right. My name's Ed Oliver, and if you didn't know that, I was going to be real disappointed, because I just ran 2 races and spent a whole bunch of money and knocked on a lot of doors. So that would really hurt my feelings if you didn't know who I was. I'm proud to be here tonight. I thank Jeremy for being here. My hat's off to anybody that runs a race. I'd like to recognize Terry Martin, who is here tonight, who ran a wonderful race. And I will tell you, he and his wife are fine folks. I appreciate very much what y'all did. As I look around the room, there are some fascinating people here, and I know I need to be talking about things that are political, but I've even got a doctor here tonight to deliver 2 of my kids. So I'm so thoroughly impressed at the audience we have. And I appreciate y'all for taking the time and making the effort to come see this and to be interested in what goes on politically in this district. This district is kind of, well, to describe it, it's 1/3 of eastern Chilton County. It's the lower half of Coosa County. It's most of Tallapoosa County. So all of the things that go on here are very diverse, very different interests in different parts of the district. The needs in one place are not necessarily the needs in another. We've got good schools in some parts, failing schools in others. You've got Coosa County with a population of 10,000 people or less, actually declining population. They've got some challenges there that are very unique. Tallapoosa County, on the other hand, we look at Ellick City sitting here, it's completely different than the other side of the river on the south end where Reeltown and the Highway 14 corridor is. Highway 14 corridor is growing. Things are great there. Some other places are not as fortunate. So without getting into a whole lot of detail, and I'll let the topics that we talk about try to answer those, I will tell you that I'm thrilled to death to be here. And I do hope that I can serve as your legislator. And I'll do my best to do what's right for District 31 or 81.
Okay, thank you, guys. So we're going to go into some questions, and we're going to give each candidate about 3 minutes to respond. We have one of our YP members, Ms. Laura Lacey, sitting here in the front that will be keeping time. So, guys, do your best to keep it under 3 minutes or around it. Our first Access to the Issues event focused on our local school system. One of the major challenges identified in that discussion was how poverty in our area impacts the starting points for children entering the school system. High-quality pre-K programs have shown to be an equalizer in that problem, and they've been found to increase school readiness through improvements in literacy, language and math skills, and boosting a child's overall academic trajectory, in addition to a lifetime of other benefits that can be traced back to pre-K. Alabama's first-class pre-K program is among the most impressive in the United States, but currently the program only reaches 30% of Alabama's 4-year-olds. So the question, and Ed, you'll be first here, should Alabama's first-class pre-K program be expanded and made available to all who want to enroll? If so, how does that fit into our state's education budget priorities?
The first class program, which it's something everybody wants to do. As far as priorities go, we actually have Mr. Tuggle here, who's on the education budget committee, and we can ask him in great detail. As far as what's budgeted for the next term, I do not know, but I do know the interest is very, very high. I know that the enhanced pre-K actually is supposed to be much, much better than what we're currently doing. The current pre-K programs that we're doing now, apparently after about 5th grade, there's no viable or measurable quality or advantage for kids that do pre-K. So without talking a whole lot about that, I would say that is going to be the way we go in the future.
The first-class pre-K program is ranked by organizations nationally that study education as the best in the country and has been for a number of years. It's a great program. The fact that 30% of our kids have access to it is great, but it means that 70% don't. And there is a way to fix that. We all know, one, you've got to prioritize it. You've got to make it important. I talked with a young teacher friend of mine the other day, and he was telling me that he did his internship. He's a special ed teacher, but he did his internship in an elementary school. And he said you could absolutely, a kid who comes in that's had the first-class pre-K program is several steps ahead of a child who isn't. When something's working, there's so few things. I mentioned some bad numbers earlier. There's so few things in Alabama where we're ranked number one. I mean, football's way up there, right? I mean, we're good at that. Roll Tide and War Eagle and all that. First-class pre-K is something where we're ranked very high in this country. The fact of the matter is that we need an education lottery in Alabama, and one of the goals of that should be universal expansion of the pre-K program. Universal, every child. There are cities that are already doing it. Tuscaloosa's already got universal pre-K in their system. So as far as an education lottery goes, I'm sure we're going to talk about lottery as we go on. But there's so many things you can do. But expanding the pre-K program, I think you could do a small portion of those funds to immediately expand to 50% with an eye towards universal pre-K in 10 years. And that is budget prioritizing, because there shouldn't be a priority, in my opinion, any higher than the opportunities we give our children. So the first-class pre-K program is great. We need to expand it with an eye towards universal pre-K.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jeffcoat, you'll be first to answer this second question, and we'll stick with the theme of education, specifically the Alabama Accountability Act. The Alabama Accountability Act allows students attending failing schools a means to exit by attending a non-failing public school or private school. Of the 4,132 children that received a scholarship in 2016 through the Alabama Accountability Act, only 983, or 24%, were zoned to attend one of the state's 76 failing schools. So the question is the reality of this process matching the original intent, given the fact that the Alabama Accountability Act serves mostly students from non-failing schools?
Yeah, about 3/4 of them. I'm all for parents having choice in their child's education. And on the surface, the Accountability Act sounds like a great thing, because we're going to allow a child maybe an opportunity to escape a failing school system. On the one hand, it gets some folks off the hook for the fact that their school system's failing, as opposed to fixing it. But with that being said, I think when you've got 3/4 of them not coming from failing school systems, obviously the act is not doing what it's intended to do. That's just common sense. It was not intended to have 3/4 of the children not in failing school systems taking advantage of that. So it should definitely be revisited. There's no question that those numbers will tell you it's not doing what it's meant to do. I'm for parents being able to utilize a private school if they so desire, but I'm a public education guy first and foremost. I believe in our public schools. I don't believe in retracting funding from our public schools. I don't believe in retracting the importance of our public schools or denying the importance of our public schools. I'm a public school guy first and foremost in terms of our priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver.
I, too, am a public school guy. I support public schools 110%. I'm endorsed by education. I take that very seriously. At the same time, I believe that parents ought to be able to make decisions concerning their kids' education. And I'll tell you that I have one child that graduated from the county school system here. 3 others I sent to another larger city school system. Those are tough decisions parents have to make, and you only get one shot at it, and it's tough. I believe that schools, the schools that we have in this district, are our key to our future. If we don't have schools that are viable, that people will come here from outside and move here and put their kids in, then I believe we will fail in several other facets. As far as charter schools go, there are so few and so new, we don't know what they're going to do. Everything you said is absolutely true. Don't know. When it comes to private schools, we have one that's just outside our district. It is changing considerably. It's also state subsidized. They're coming up with some programs to integrate that private school into what we're doing with our public schools. I'm very interested to see how that will work. We are looking now for a school system, so when somebody moves here from a Hoover or a Mountain Brook, and they walk in the school and they take their child by the hand to go register them for school, it's not so different that they just turn around and go get in the parking lot and go to Lee County. So that's kind of where I am with school systems. I want us to be competitive, and I'll do anything I can to make it stay that way. Now, to answer your question about charter schools, that's not going to be a factor for us anytime soon, so I'm not particularly worried about it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Right now, my stance is that I am for public education.
Okay, thank you. We may get a little bit more into education as we go on, but we're going to move on from that topic and discuss health care. So from 2009 until 2017, Alabama lost 7 rural hospitals which is among the highest rates of closure in the nation per capita. Not only does the healthcare crisis in Alabama impact availability, accessibility, and affordability for those in need of health services, but there's also a significant economic impact as well, with hospitals being a leading employer in providing a significant economic opportunity in rural areas. Here recently, we've had to learn in Alexander City and read headlines about our local hospital, Russell Medical, having to lay off employees in a reaction to tough financial times. As of June 2018, Alabama is one of 17 states not to accept federal dollars and expand Medicaid. So the question, and Ed, you'll go first here, do you think expanding Medicaid is part of the solution to our state's health care troubles? If so, how do you see the funding playing out at the state level? If not, what are some things that our state government can do to ensure our hospitals stay open and residents of Alabama have access to affordable health care?
First of all, I'd like to say that we have 2 hospitals in this county that I am attached to the hips to both of them. And whatever it takes to make them viable and functional and serviceable to the folks of this district, I'm going to do. As far as the expansion of Medicaid, I do not believe it will happen. If it does happen, it will not happen anytime soon. What I believe may happen is there may be some revisions to the way we administer Medicaid. I believe that probably sometime in November or December, you'll see some plans floated by where they will come up with a mechanism to allow hospitals to recoup some of the 90% reimbursement money. Understand we have the lowest reimbursement for Medicaid in the country, and it makes it very difficult for healthcare providers to survive. I worked for 15 years in the air ambulance business, and I have been on that end, and I have seen that firsthand. Very difficult. On the other hand, with full Medicaid expansion, 340,000 additional people on Medicaid, between prisons and Medicaid, if we met what our obligations are right now, that's 63 cents of every dollar in the general fund for those 2 things. So it's a very difficult position for us to be in to say that, well, if we put out 10%, we get 90%. Well, there are some other factors. If it were that simple, it would be great. But if you don't have the money for the 10% and you don't have anybody to pay for it, to come up with that 10%, how do you do it? I guarantee you there are a lot of smart people sitting around right now that are just absolutely terrified about the conditions that our hospitals are in right now, particularly rural hospitals. There's another factor also, and that's Medicare and the way it pays. It's very difficult, and it's slow, and that makes it difficult to keep a hospital in operation. The other factor is insurance reimbursements from private insurance. They are the lowest in the country in Alabama also. So it's not just Medicaid. That's not the cure-all for everything. That's a big one, and it's huge, and it looks like the panacea. If we had full-blown Medicaid expansion, all these great things would happen. But that is not the only answer.
The Alabama Hospital Association has a very detailed plan for reforming Medicaid in this state. It includes, as its linchpin, the expansion of Medicaid. There are 34 states that have done so. I would say, as far as how difficult it is, we can ask Vice President Pence, who did that in Indiana. He expanded and then reformed his Medicaid system, and he saved the state money. They weren't spending more. They were getting more. In Alabama, had we taken the expansion in 2014, when we should have, it's a complete failure of leadership on our part that we didn't. Had we taken it in 2014, we would have, by now, had 30,000 jobs created in the healthcare sector. We also would not have as many hospitals closing as we have now. And if we have smart reforms in the Medicaid system, and you can look for the Alabama Hospital Association's plan on that, to do that. It's very detailed. I sat down with them and had them go through it with me so I would understand it, because a lot of it is, for an old radio guy, difficult to understand. But once you explain it, you understand it. The Medicaid expansion, there's no excuse for why we haven't done it. The Virginia legislature finally got fed up waiting for the governor to do it and did it themselves. I think it's going to take some leadership to do that. As far as the increased cost, had we taken it in 2014, we would be paying 0 for 3 years and then 10%. As it stands now, we would have to pay 6% for 3 years and then 10%. What it amounts to is a 1.86% increase in the Alabama Medicaid budget. 1.86% is all it amounts to get that done. It's to save our hospitals. We find money for everything we want to do in this state if we think it's important. We change our priorities. We move stuff around. We tax cigarettes or alcohol or whatever we do. But when we think it's important, we make it happen. 200,000 people could have health coverage today that don't. And it's the uninsured that are killing our hospitals, not Medicaid. And the Medicaid expansion is the first key to that. So we need to get on that. That needs to be priority number one. In fact, I've been screaming this for 5 years. My wife, when I made the decision to run, she goes, you sit here on the back porch all the time and talk about why we haven't taken the Medicaid expansion. You've got to take this opportunity to run. I said, well, I guess I do. Because if you're going to sit around and holler about something for 5 years, you have an opportunity to address it. I think you should. Medicaid expansion needs to happen. It needs to happen immediately. And then we need to work with the Hospital Association on solidifying our rural hospitals. Otherwise, and this is very personal to me, 2 years ago on June 27th, my wife woke me up on a Monday morning at 7 o'clock with her head and shoulders, chest, back, killing her. The ambulance came, took her to Russell Medical Center. Her blood pressure was 218 over 116. They were able to stabilize her there in the emergency room, and they were able to run tests, and they're getting things done. Dr. Kevin Sublett saved my wife's life. Dr. Sublett came in and ran some tests. It took all day. Finally found out she had an aortic aneurysm, and had it burst, she would have had maybe a minute to live. If we lose our hospital, if I have to drive to Opelika to get her stabilized, I'm a widower today. This is personal to me.
Emma surveyed 80 business and industry leaders around the state. According to those business leaders, education and workforce training is the most pressing need facing the state. The same group at UA conducted a workforce study that found that 24% of the state's workforce falls into the category of underemployment, with those reasons for underemployment being a lack of job opportunities, low wages, and living too far from better jobs. Similar to the previous question, what role should our state legislature play in growing the workforce to meet the demands of our business and industry, and how do we ensure people who want better opportunities have the training and opportunities for advancement?
Central Alabama Community College has a great workforce development program going now, and it's partly state funded. We need to continue that. That's one area where our state representative can play a critical role, is making sure that we maintain that funding and where possible to grow it. I'd like to, over the next 5 years, see the student population at CAC double. I mean, we've got a great opportunity there. It's a wonderful tool that we have at Central Alabama Community College to create workforce. And we've got others in other parts of the district as well. So how do you do it in the state government? You fund it. You fund workforce development. I prefer to do it through an education lottery. There are other options people have too. But again, I think through scholarships for workforce development, I think through supporting our community college system and helping them to continue to develop cutting-edge workforce development programs, working with our schools on those programs as well. You have the dual enrollment options that are happening now. There are things out there. Let's make sure we have them fully funded. Let's make sure that we're aggressive with them, and then create that workforce. I'd love to see a program like that Tennessee Promise in Alabama. Talked with a small business owner in Dadeville a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the Gateway Scholarship here in Alex City, because our youngest will be taking advantage of that here next year. And he thinks it's a great program. He'd love to. He's tried to get together with folks and set it up in Dadeville, but they haven't been able to make it happen. I think we can do it statewide. And that ought to be one of our major priorities in an education lottery.
Mr. Oliver?
Having a trained workforce is absolutely critical, and I think that we are very fortunate to have the education opportunities that we have right here in Alex City. One other one that I would like to mention, in Camp Hill, which is outside of our district, we have a school there, which is a trade school in the traditional sense, which teaches welding. Those kids make about $40,000 coming from high school to welding school to the job market. The unfortunate thing right now is we're having a hard time finding work for them that's local. They're having to go somewhere else. So that's we're looking at some skilled folks we're producing. We just need people here which one comes first? Do we have the skilled labor force waiting for industry to move here and use them, or do we train a skilled labor force that goes somewhere else and works? I am thrilled to death that people here have an opportunity to get to work, But one of the reasons I ran to be in the legislature is because I want to have a place where my 4 kids can come back here and live close to me. I've got 3 daughters, and I don't want them to go far. So it's very important to me that this is a viable place to live and work. So yes, we need a trained, skilled workforce, and we need a place for them to work.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next topic, and Ed, you'll go here. Go first here. Now, there are lots of stats out there regarding Alabama's infrastructure. None of them are very good. 50% of our state's roads are rated in fair, poor, or very poor condition. 1/3 of all fatal car crashes are the result of roadway features. Our most recent infrastructure report card graded Alabama bridges at a C-, roads at a D+, public transit at a D. With all of those alarming stats, the reality gets worse when you look at road use. In 2015, the number of miles driven on Alabama roads topped 67 billion, which is 59% up over miles driven in 1990. The mechanism we've typically used to pay for upkeep of our roads, a per-gallon gasoline tax, is faltering for a number of reasons, such as inflation and transportation construction cost and greater fuel efficiency in vehicles. So the question is, do you support an increase in the gasoline tax, or road use tax as some call it, in order to fund infrastructure upgrades? If so, how do you sell a tax increase to your constituents? If not, what are ways that we can address the infrastructure crisis?
I will say this. It is so tempting to just say, yes, I support the gas tax. We're going to put 18% on there, and we're going to build roads, and everybody's going to be happy. At this point, nobody knows for sure what the plan is going to be. There's some folks that are pushing around an idea that there's money in other places that we can use for matching funds, as much as $60 million that already exist in the state budget that we can use. I don't have enough information at this time to commit to the gas tax. Now, I am telling you that we live in a state where we are second in the nation in fatalities, and that's unacceptable. 1/3 of those fatalities are directly related to road conditions. And that, to me, that's unacceptable. It's like we were saying, if you want to change something bad enough, you'll figure out a way. But to immediately say we're going to have an 18-cent gas tax per gallon, I'm afraid that might have some unintended consequences that all the other things we just talked about, as far as industry and people moving in here and just a ripple effect that could be catastrophic for us. So I would want to look at that very, very closely. Now, I didn't say I wouldn't do it, but I said I'd certainly want to sit here and let's think about this for a little bit, and let's see how we're gonna improve our infrastructure.
The plan that the Alabama Infrastructure Alliance has is based around a fuel tax increase. What it would amount to is about 4 cents, right? Nobody likes it. I mean, I don't like any taxes. It's not my favorite thing, but it is the way that we fund our infrastructure. And the fact of the matter is that we haven't addressed it since 1992. It's time to revisit that. It's time to take a look at it. There are also mechanisms, because everybody asks, what do you do if gas shoots back up to $4 or $5 a gallon? Well, what you do is you just put a cap where that tax goes away if you start to have those kind of economic struggles. Hopefully we won't have any of that. But in the meantime, you can rebuild your infrastructure, and you can also develop ways to use a consumption tax, a fuel tax on alternative energies as they get more popular as well. Because one of the problems you got with fuel taxes now is that vehicles are getting more fuel efficient. They're using less gas. You have electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. You've got more different kinds of energy coming along. So I think we've got to have a plan moving forward. Let's work on the now. Let's work 2 years ahead. Let's think 20 years ahead, and come up with a plan on that. And I think if we do that, we'll be fine. But yes, I would support the fuel tax, and I would support an aggressive means of getting our infrastructure rebuilt, because there's going to be a federal infrastructure bill, and it's going to happen. And we're not going to get our hands on those matching funds if you don't have a solid plan for it. So we need to go ahead and start working on it now.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll move on to the next topic, which is, ethics and corruption. And Jeremy, you'll be first here. Alabama has had several high-profile elected officials forced to resign or removed from office in recent years, including Governor Robert Bentley, Speaker of the House Mike Hubbard, Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court Roy Moore, and more recently, State Representative Oliver Robinson was convicted of bribery. So the question is, are these isolated incidents that are just coincidentally happening in a close proximity to one another, or is there a pervasive culture of corruption in our state political system? If so, how do you make sure you're not caught up in something unethical or corrupt?
There are some good people in Montgomery, so I'm going to qualify this before I talk on it. There are good people all over Alabama, including in Montgomery, including in our state government, and good people who are trying to do it the right way and trying to do the right thing. The problem is that we have a system set up where if somebody is not necessarily on the up and up, if somebody is not into doing it the right way, it's pretty easy for them to find a way to make a little, as we call it, side cheddar around the house. There's too many temptations there. To me, it's an embarrassment for this state to be number one. Here's the thing. We're number one in the country right now in three things. Infant mortality, we're number one. We're 50th in life expectancy, so we die earliest. And we're number one in political corruption. I'm not trying to make a joke out of it, but these are not things you want to be known for. So we have tough ethics laws that passed. 2012, I believe, is when they passed. They were written in part by Speaker of the House Mike Hubbard. He championed the law. He got it through. Then he got in trouble under the law. And then his lawyers argued that the law that he wrote and passed was unconstitutional. Now, does that make sense? Doesn't make any sense to me. He's still sitting on appeal. Do you think we'll actually hear the results of that appeal before the elections in November? I don't. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. That ethics law has been chipped away at ever since his conviction, too, by the way. This gets chipped away. You know, we even, there was one state senator, I believe, or legislator who created a new word in the last discussions when they were changing the law. Instead of lobbyist, he was going to call him an economic developist. I don't even know what an economic developist is. And they do that so that this person can then hide their identity, and then they say they need to hide their identity because of this. Well, then, you know, who are you accountable to? Certainly not to the people of Alabama if we don't even have the right to know your name. So we need to restore the ethics law from 2012 to its original tough state. And I am a firm believer, and I have been for 25 years, on term limits on the Alabama legislature. There is no reason that somebody needs to serve 40 years in the same spot. I appreciate your knowledge of the system. I appreciate your desire to serve your community. But there are two generations of young people who've come along after you, and maybe they want a shot to lead. Maybe they have some good ideas. And I would say, you know, somebody said here recently that term limits are up to the people because you get to vote on them every 4 years, right? And that would be true if it was a fair fight. It's not a fair fight. The incumbent has every advantage. The incumbent has all the money. The incumbent has all the influence. The incumbent has all the name recognition. It's not a fair fight. Term limits are the way to go. I don't know exactly how long. I know last year one of our Republican senators proposed a 3-term limit. I've heard people talk about a 4-term limit. I've heard people talk about a 2-term limit. But I think it's time to put it on the table. And I know the temptation is to say that they'll never do it. They'll never pass it. But I actually believe that if enough people fight for it, that they will start to listen.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Oliver?
You know, one of the first things I did when I was getting ready to run is I went down and sat down and talked with a guy that was an old legislator, and he was pointing at a map on his wall that had pictures of all the legislators on it. And he said, you know, that guy right there is in jail, and this guy right here is in jail, and this guy right here is in jail. It is sobering, and you wonder how in the world people do that. I've seen all sorts of folks in this world, and you make decisions to do things. You know, at first you take a little bit, then you take a little bit more, and then, you know, after a while you can start justifying it in your own mind, and you've done something that's wrong and you're in trouble. The legislature is no different. It's just like anything else where there's an opportunity to do bad things. I've had it put to me that a third of the legislature is down there for the right reasons. A third of them are down there for reasons that are not necessarily for the good of their own folks. And then a third are down there for the wrong reasons. That's an oversimplification, of course, but I think regardless of whether it's the Alabama legislature or anybody else's, there's always that element. everything Jeremy said was so. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that we've had some things happen in the past in the legislature that are unacceptable. All I can tell you is when I'm in the legislature, I ain't doing that. I don't want to embarrass my kids or you. So, I can't speak for other people and what they do. The way our laws are set up, we did start with some of the toughest ethics laws, a complete revamping of ethics laws when the Republicans came in. Since Hubbard's been gone, same thing, tougher and tougher. But you've always got that element that's going to be trying to find a way to do a workaround to their advantage. And that's the history of politics everywhere. No, I'm not for that. That's not my interest in going to Montgomery to be in the legislature. But that is an absolute part of political life.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on from that topic and get into something agriculture, which is very important to the state of Alabama and District 81. Now, the most recent reports that I could find from 2010, and I'm sure these numbers have increased since then, but agriculture, forestry, and related industries contribute over $70 billion to Alabama's economy, which is 40% of the state's GDP, and those industries employ nearly 600,000 people, which is 22% of our state's workforce. Given that agriculture, forestry, and those related industries are so important to the state and our district, what is your view on how our farmers and foresters can be best supported?
Full disclosure, I've got 545 acres of pine trees, so forestry is real important to me. Whether I get to eat regularly or my kids get to go to college depends on how we do in the forestry business. Alabama has been very, very kind in terms of property tax. Most folks look at it like, well, if we had the same property taxes they have in Georgia or we had the same ones they have in Florida, we'd be so much better off. That might be true until you got the folks that are small farmers that are in agriculture and in a family-sized operation. If I had to pay a penny more, literally a penny more in income tax or property tax on what I pay annually on what I have, I could not afford to do it. Just could not afford it. And I know that Terry was on the Farmers Federation Board of Directors. He can tell you, most folks are not giant timber companies that are out here that are trying to get rich growing pine trees of all things. You make an investment in a pine tree, it's still the same at the stump that it was 20 years ago. It hasn't gone up at all. You pay $80 for a release spray per acre, and you sit on that for 25 years waiting to get your money back. So anything that I can do to keep a family plot of land, whether it's pine trees or row crop agriculture in a family, I'm going to do. And understanding that that is a completely different thing than large timber companies that are a commercial operation.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy.
Anytime someone wants to talk about a property tax increase, it's the first thing I always remind them, do you know how that affects our farmers? Alabama is very much an agriculture state, and we have to be very conscious of their needs because just in this district alone, $125 million economic impact per year, 2,500 jobs impacted just in this district alone. So it's a major part of our economy. Rural broadband access is a big thing right now. For our farmers, it's something that we need to continue to develop. Obviously, farming lends itself to being in rural areas, and when you don't have broadband, it makes it difficult to run a business in this day and age, or at least to run it as efficiently as possible. So, I think rural broadband access is a way that we can continue to support our agriculture here. And I think last year there were some good things done, no question. When you had the irrigation credits that were done last year, and you had the equipment purchase tax credits that were done last year. There were some good things in the bill that came through the legislature last year. So continuing to support our farmers is, to me, it's just non-negotiable. It's too important of an economic impact here in our district.
Okay, thank you. So moving on from agriculture, and we're going to get into something that is a little different, and that's what's called constitutional carry. According to a study completed by the Crime Prevention Research Center, Alabama has the highest rate of any state in the United States for concealed weapons permits, with 20% of the adult population in Alabama holding such a permit. There are currently 14 states in the U.S. that allow permitless or constitutional carry as it's called, where people are not required to obtain a permit for carrying a concealed weapon. There have been bills sponsored and passed by the Alabama Senate in the last 2 legislative sessions to allow permitless carry. Those bills, however, did not make it out of committee in the Alabama House. The Alabama Sheriff's Association opposes permitless carry, saying that law enforcement loses the ability to deny permits to applicants that they feel pose a danger to our communities. So the question is, and Jeremy, you're up first here, should Alabama be a constitutional carry state where residents are not required to have a permit to carry concealed weapons?
This is always an interesting question. It always makes me think back to my childhood. My stepfather was a registered gun collector. He collected 1894 Winchester rifles. We had about 70 or 75 of them in the house. We put them, they're hanging on a wall in a room, right? Or they were. I mean, he's passed on now, but we called it the gun room. We had another 15 or 20 guns in the house at all times. It's just how I grew up in Wilcox County. Any of you have been there know that you need that many guns to fend off the snakes in Wilcox County. So my stepfather, it really gave me a healthy respect for guns. We own 4 or 5 now. I think I bought our boys their first when they were 10 or 11. And we own several now. I enjoy them. I support the Second Amendment. I support your Second Amendment right to own a firearm, and mine, because I believe in what James Madison wrote. I believe that Madison intended it to be a personal defense and perhaps to ward off tyranny as well. With that being said, I cannot support permitless carry because I had a talk with Jimmy Abbott just probably a week ago, 2 weeks ago, to ask him about this very thing, because I think Jimmy Abbott's one of the best sheriffs in America. And I asked Sheriff Abbott about that. He said 2 things. One, he believes that it makes his deputies, his officers, and law enforcement personnel less safe on the street because they don't know who is and who isn't, and they can't find out. And 2, he believes that it also could put guns in the hands of the wrong people because they run a background check when you come in to get that permit. So he wants the ability, he said everything from, of course, criminal background to even a forced mental health commitment can show up in those background checks. And so you really can do some good with those things. And he says it happens all the time. So he convinced me anything that makes our law enforcement less safe, I've got to be against. The permits aren't that onerous to do. So I support the Second Amendment. I support our right to own guns. I just want a background check done. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver?
I believe in constitutional carry, period. I'm AQ rated by the NRA. I'm on the board of directors for the Friends of the NRA in East Alabama. Everything that Jeremy said absolutely is viable and should be considered. I don't believe that once the Constitution gives you the right to carry, somebody else has the right to supersede that right, say you have to have this permit or you have to do that or this. In a practical term, what he was talking about, Jimmy Abbott was saying, is absolutely true. Law enforcement is at risk when they don't know who's got guns out there. Unfortunately, the folks that are dangerous and put them at risk probably aren't going to have a permit anyway. That's just the way it is. There are some things that go along with planning and judgment, and it's unfortunate that you can't make everybody have good sense. If you open carry a pistol into Walmart, you're not making anybody safer. It's one of those things where it's legal to do, but should you? Probably not. You show up at a football game with your rifle on your shoulder, probably not a good idea. But the constitutional carry folks, there are some folks that believe that it's your right. If that's what you want to do, you should be able to. Once again, that's a very difficult area with law enforcement and the public. In a rural county, when you come in and get a permit, a concealed carry permit, they can charge you $15. It's great money for the sheriff's department. That's an arbitrary fee, by the way. Every county, most are different. Spoke with another sheriff today in another county, and he had a completely different take than Sheriff Abbott did. Very difficult. The problem we have now is we got so many folks running around that are medicated or shouldn't have firearms in the first place, and nobody will talk about that they shouldn't be, whether it's your great uncle that's kind of weird that's you talk about him. Well, nobody tells anybody else that he's got a problem. I don't think concealed carry in and of itself is going to help with that kind of issue. Don't think permits are going to help with that kind of issue. Gun sales, yeah, where we do background checks, I think that'll help. And as we get better access to mental health records and we find ways to get around some HIPAA issues, sure, that'll make a difference. School's still out with me on what is good judgment and what rights a sheriff ought to have in his local county. I believe the sheriff is the highest law of the land in his county, and he should have some input. But at the same time, I do just flat out, I believe in constitutional carry, that is your right, and you shouldn't have to pay money to get a permit from somebody to carry one.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the questions that we were able to come up with. I hope you guys thought that they were good and got to the heart of the matter on some of these issues. We did allow people to submit questions ahead of time by sending questions to our group, and we're going to take a minute now to ask you guys a couple of those questions. So the first one is from Kathy Fox, who lives here in Alexander City. We had a question similar to this, and I'll do my best to try to frame it. Her request was explaining your views on the First Amendment as it relates to religion or the concept of the separation of church and state. So in November, a constitutional amendment will be voted on that, if passed, would allow for the display of the Ten Commandments on state property. So the question, Ed, you'll go first here. Do you support this amendment? And would the passage of this amendment and the state's amendment to the state's constitution and the subsequent display of the Ten Commandments on state property be a violation of the separation of church and state and make Alabama vulnerable to federal lawsuits?
The only way we'll know if it makes us vulnerable to federal lawsuits is to do it. Initially, I support it. I think we should do it.
I'm tend to agree. I think the federal courts are going to do what the federal courts are going to do, and I'll support it in November.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question, Ms. Fox. Another question is from Daniel Story from Dadeville, Alabama. How will you support the line item budget for ADECA and ADEM? And those acronyms are ADECA, Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs, ADEM as the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. How will you support the line item budget for those two organizations, agencies?
My first.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a good friend, dear friend. We've been friends since 9th grade, who works for environmental management. I think it's a great organization that we should fully support. I believe the same thing on ADECA. I think both of them do good work. I think anytime you're trying to budget, you're always looking at to make sure that organizations or agencies are doing what their mission is. But in the case of those two, I think they do good work, and I would continue to support them.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver?
I'll be honest with you, I have not considered it at this point. That's something I'll have to look into. Good question, but I just have not given it any thought.
Okay. Again, these gentlemen are open to any questions afterwards, anytime between now and November the 6th. I'm sure you guys will have chances to interact with the two candidates. I think they both did a very good job of answering the questions in great detail with great insight and knowledge, and we thank them for that. That does it for the questions that we put together and also that the audience submitted. The gentlemen now are going to have a chance to deliver closing remarks around 5 minutes or so. I don't think either of you had a problem sticking to that 5 minutes or the 3-minute answers. So excellent job. And Ed, you'll kick us off.
She did such a great job with the sign.
That's great. Go ahead, Mr. Oliver.
First of all, thank you for sitting here and listening to us. I appreciate very much the fact that each and every one of you are here. We are sitting here, we are vying for a job that I believe is very, very important. When the time came for me to make up my mind to run for this, I was not seeking it. It was something that all of a sudden I felt compelled to do, and I did. And I'm committed 110% to serving you, the folks of this district. There are a lot of things that I have no idea when I park that car in the first day in the legislature and walk across that parking lot. There are just a million things I don't know. There are a lot of things I don't know how they work. And remember, I'm a political science major from the University of Alabama. Both of my parents were politicians. I have grown up in this business. I can tell you that I will commit to work as hard as I can on every issue. We'll learn as much as I can about every issue. Since the last election, since the runoff for the Republican primary, I've spent virtually all of my time either in Montgomery or on the phone learning about different issues. I don't believe in being unprepared. I'm an Army guy. As many of you may know, I'm a retired Army. You don't show up not knowing what you want to do. I believe the key to being a good legislator is being the guy in the room that knows more than anybody else. The legislature meets 100 days a year. That means you go down there on, Monday you spend preparing for Tuesday. Tuesday you go to the legislature. Wednesday you go to caucus and go to your committee meetings and do the things you can do there. Meet again the next day. And then Friday you should be tying up all the things you started on Monday. And then you spend the weekend starting the cycle over again. I know everybody down there doesn't do that, but that is my commitment to you. That's what the kind of legislator that I want to be. Once again, thank you, Mark Tuggle, for coming tonight, and I appreciate what he's done for the last 8 years. He has been a good mentor to me thus far, and I expect him to be in the future. I look forward to serving each and every one of you, and I'm always available. I hope you'll join my campaign and help me any way you want to. Appreciate having you. A lot of good folks in this district, and I'm proud to be from here, and I'm proud to have an opportunity to try to serve you.
Young Professionals Group, the Chamber, friends here at Valley National for hosting this event. And again, I'm blown away by how many of you came. I had no idea what to expect. I'm glad that there's so many people that are interested and engaged, and I think that's good for Alabama and good for America as a whole. Well, when I got into this campaign, I didn't have to look far for what I wanted to run on. These are things I've talked about with my friends for 20 years. Had never run for office before, had never had to develop a platform, but I knew what I wanted to run on. Economic development, those 5 issues that we talked about earlier, to build our local economy. Education, supported by an education lottery. It's time. We haven't voted on it in 20 years. And here's the interesting part of that to me. Auburn University did a poll 2016, said that 70% of Alabamians support an education lottery, only 25% oppose. But we don't get to vote on it. Robert Bentley ran a whole campaign 8 years ago on a promise that we would get to vote on it. And then 4 years later, when it didn't happen, he ran and said, I really, really, really promise this time you're going to get to vote on it. And we hear it. We hear over and over again. We hear people in Montgomery go, "Oh, I support an education lottery. I really, really do." But when you control the governor's office, the lieutenant governor's office, the attorney general's office, every statewide office, and have supermajorities in both houses of the legislature, and yet we don't get to vote on it. Well, to turn a phrase that someone else said, don't give me mountain oysters, tell me a seafood. We need to get that done. We need to use it to expand pre-K, and it needs to be universal. We need to do it to expand scholarships in our community college programs for workforce development, support K through 12, to fully fund our education system. Medicaid expansion, as we talked about earlier, I think it's a failure complete on our state government's part that we haven't done it yet, and that needs to happen. And then term limits on the Alabama legislature and restoring teeth to our ethics law. Those are really the 4 things I base this whole thing about, because I think they all affect working people who sometimes struggle. About 11 or 12 years ago, my wife and I were presented an opportunity, what sounded like a golden opportunity on the Gulf Coast. So we went down there pursuing this. We're thinking this is going to be this is going to be a great business opportunity. And that was 2007. As you guys remember, early 2008, the banks began to crash, stock market crashed, then the economy followed in the fall. We lost everything. Literally went back to zero. We lost cars and went back to the bank. We moved 3 or 4 times trying to find a place we could afford to live in. We, selling things to try to keep the lights on while we're fighting between unemployment and underemployment for 2 or 3 years. I was turned down for I don't know how many jobs because I was overqualified. They're like, well, you have a degree in political science and a master's degree in history. Why do you want a job at a gas station? Because my kids need to eat. And we struggled with that. For 2 or 3 years. It's tough times. It's tough to talk about. It's not fun to talk about to other people. But I think it's important, and it's important to me from a spiritual aspect, but that's something, if you want to talk about that, we'll talk about it after because I do believe that God was stripping away my pride at that point in my life. And it changed a lot of things for me moving forward. It's probably one of the reasons that I'm here. So I've really kind of committed my life to doing some things for other people as this opportunity then presented itself. And as my faith life changed and as my personal life went with it, everything's been on getting better since then. So people have struggles, and sometimes our struggle needs to be the same as someone else's who's struggling. That single mom in Reeltown with 2 kids who needs help with daycare so she can get a job. That should be in part our struggle. That elderly couple in Newside who has to make a decision between buying medication or buying food. That should be our struggle. Or a kid in Dayville, a teenager who's going to Dayville High School and working really hard to get the best grades he can because he wants to be the first person in his family to go to college. But we don't have a Hope Scholarship here. That should be our struggle. That nurse in Alex City who's laid off 2 weeks ago when the Medicaid expansion could put them back to work. That should be our struggle. So these are the things that we're struggling for. You go down to Rockford, Alabama. Go to Clanton. You see the same struggles. Young couples who are underemployed or unemployed. These are problems, and there are ways to address them. And I hope we've laid those out tonight. Our website is commonsenseal.com if you want to visit it. Commonsenseal.com. It kind of lays out in more detail, and I'm happy to stick around and talk with you more if you guys are available and you want to talk afterwards, okay? So that's it. And again, thank you to all of you for coming. God bless you. Have a great night.
Well, guys, I hope everyone enjoyed hearing from the candidates. I thought they both did an excellent job in outlining their platforms and their visions for District 81 in the state of Alabama. It's a very politically in tune crowd, I can tell, because you're here tonight. So I want to make a couple of announcements about a couple of things politically that are coming up in our area. On Saturday, voter registration drive. If you know people who need to register to vote, or if you'd like to take some people and encourage them to register to vote, downtown Alexander City from 8 to 2, next door to the Coffee Corner. Now, also in downtown Alexander City at City Hall at 10 a.m., we have the pleasure of welcoming a United States Senator, Senator Doug Jones, to Alexander City for a town hall forum at City Hall. So if you're interested in hearing about what's going on in the Senate, a very politically charged time nationally, I think it'd be a good opportunity to learn and engage with a sitting U.S. Senator. And a candidate running for governor of the state of Alabama, Walt Maddox, the mayor of Tuscaloosa, will be in Alexander City on September the 13th at the Mill 280 at 5:30 p.m. That's open to the public as well. Again, I want to thank our sponsors for the event tonight. Engineered Cooling Services is the presenting sponsor of Access to the Issues. Tallapoosa County Commissioner T.C. Coley is the quarterly sponsor. Our generous sponsors throughout the year, Valley National Bank, what an unbelievable facility they have here for events such as this. Their support is tremendous, and it means the world to us. Lee Marketing Group, Lee Williams, financial advisor with Nowlin Associates, and something that's very important to our community and the support and continuation of our group, Russell Medical. So I want to thank them. Thank you guys for coming. Let's give these guys another round of applause. Oop. And that's it. Have a safe drive home.
Back gets stiff sitting down that long, man.
You have great answers.
Oh,